To the journey. My name is Kevin Polky, and I am the host of the journey. Um, as many of the listeners have known, we many times have guests that will come on and share their stories of transformation as a result of obstacles that uh, have been in their life. Those obstacles may have been setbacks from somebody else's choices, or they may have been setbacks uh, based upon some of their own choices. But either way, the primary focus in those stories is not only to give a little bit of a backstory and the content of what a person may have experienced, but primarily what are the learning lessons? What did they learn as they um, navigated through those obstacles, and what did they learn about themselves that they wouldn't have learned if they wouldn't have had that obstacle or that setback? And then other times we have reflections, and today is we're going to have talk about a reflection. um, Yesterday, this weekend, I was at our home church, which is Bethesda Covenant. I've had Pastor Dan Hines as a guest a couple different times on the show, and he was teaching yesterday. It also happened to be a shout out to Drake and Danielle. This was the day that they chose to get their daughter Delilah baptized. It it probably that probably much pretty much set the tone that Pastor Dan, it kind of gave him some of the backstory that his particular church and that particular aspect of covenant, uh, the covenant church has a little bit different stance on baptism. They talk about it from uh, an aspect of infant baptism, which is really then the commitment of the parents and the commitment of the godparents or sponsors, and then the commitment as the church body to, in this case, um, introduce and raise Delilah with the teachings of Jesus, and then not only just teaching her, but then also providing that community for her as she is growing up. And then at some time, she will be able to have the choice of when she is of age to make that choice regarding her own spiritual journey. And I think that the way Pastor Dan had explained it yesterday probably was the first time that I heard it in the way that I did. Um, he talked about that at different time periods, different denominations, and then we even within denominations that there had been um, one way or another a better way of doing it, which would cause that division within a group of people, and they might split off and decide to create their own way of doing it. And it's an interesting stance that Bethesda Covenant decided that they were going to see both sides, see that it is that there's a place and that it all works in the common good or the common direction of how to best serve our community and serve the individuals within our community, and educate and model for, in this case, Delilah, as she grows throughout her life. He then transitioned into talking about this concept of character and introducing the topic of integrity. He talked about this idea that we may that our true character, our essence of our character is who are we when no one's watching. This idea that integrity is the congruency, our integrity is the congruency of who we are in our private life as well as our public life. The the congruency of who do we profess to be, And are my actions aligning with that? In other words, do my words follow my actions or my steps? And when we think about this, maybe for some of us on most things, especially depending on where we're at in our age, in our life and what age we're at, um, we may have wrestled with this before. I know that for me, growing up, um, I had a couple, like most people, a couple different friend groups. I had a friend group of the athletes that I were with either during football season or wrestling season, and then I had individuals that I went to middle school with that when by the time we got to high school, they no longer were participating in sports, but I still knew them because we had three middle schools that merged into one high school. I had my friends that I associated with that that were at different grade levels that may be involved with church. And then I had my friends, which I seem to put a lot of value on regarding the older guys that I worked out with at the local gym. I remember thinking to myself that I would never want, especially the guys that I worked out with in the gym, most of them were 5, 10 years older than me. I would never want them to walk into my friend group of when people went to the mall or wherever we might be, and I'm acting different in that around that group than I would be acting at the gym. I wouldn't want them to see me in an unfavorable light. Now, looking back on it, that probably had a lot to do with wanting their approval and not wanting to be rejected by them. But it was the beginning of me looking at how could I assimilate all of me into the same person so that no matter where I was the same Kevin, either at the gym or with my sports friends or with my friends from middle school or my church friends, that Kevin was consistent with those. What I didn't want to be more than anything is I didn't want to be fake or didn't want to be a poser or accused of that. So I think that was the first time of learning how to make choices to be congruent or consistent with who I wanted to be first seen by and then who I wanted to be. Um, Later, it evolved probably even more so into a spiritual journey. And maybe all along there was an element of that about wanting to not have God as I understood him to be upset with me. Maybe it was to to gather a blessing or avoid some level of punishment. Probably that had a lot to do with the way that I was taught about how God was or how the church was. Um, Specifically, remember that during sports seasons, that I would try to control different factors so that I would uh, be granted a good game or a blessing regarding my performance in whatever sport that I was competing in. Later, my belief and understanding of how God operates is less about that. Now it's more about going in and out of the presence of God. That it's less about thinking I'm going to be punished if I'm doing something wrong, recognizing that that in itself already has its own consequences, that God really doesn't need to add on to the natural consequences of me making a poor choice. For me, being able to, similar to when I was a younger person, how can I be congruent with who I am when I'm alone and there is no accountability at all? to be similar to how I am if I'm in public where there is or possibly accountability. It's less today, even though I think there probably is still some aspect of not wanting people to be displeased with me or wanting the conflict of that. But I think today it probably has more about having the courage to be congruent so that I could be in that flow, into that flow of being in God's presence. Being able to take an inventory on those things that cause me to be incongruent. Almost always they have to do with either choices of behavior or choices of thought, and then how to resist the temptation or how to move in a different direction. If it's a thought, what can I do to direct that energy somewhere else? What can I do that if it's a behavior, what can I do to resist that behavior or that habit and then move to move into a different process? Recognizing that in itself, the if there is a reward, the reward would be just being in that flow of not having to have a secret. I believe, at least for me, that this is most likely going to be a lifelong process, that there will be continued, there'll be things that are going to arise that I need to be aware of that could slip into me being incongruent of having the character that works best for me to be in God's presence. So the invitation to you as you're listening to this is, what things can you do? What things can you raise your awareness about the congruency of who you are when you're at work or the marketplace or in social media, whatever it is? Be congruent of who you are there as well as who you are when no one's watching. That that what you are doing, that regardless of where you're at, you will be okay with that, even if it doesn't make everyone um, happy with your choices. That you have put in some thought about why you're making that choice, and you're okay when it is being witnessed by others. I think it first comes with that awareness, and then um, and making some choices regarding, am I living with the integrity, with the congruence that I can be okay with. As always, I appreciate you listening. And if for some reason there's something that was said today, share that with somebody that may could possibly benefit that as well. And as always, love to hear feedback from you regarding what you may think of it. Um, Look forward to being with you next week.